It's 2001, 2002. I'm trying to make beats like Timbaland, Pharrell, Dr. Dre, even Lil Jon. And it sounded just like that. Somebody trying to make beats like Timbaland, Pharrell, and Dr. Dre. It was cool to start off learning by copying their styles at first, but at some point, I had to figure out how to find my own sound and stand out. It took a lot of time for me to figure out what was stopping me. Spoiler, it was fear. So in this video, I'm going to share why fear is the biggest blocker to standing out, what can happen if you blend in too much, and the 3 ways to start finding your sound right now for free. Okay, so let's address the elephant in the room. A lot of us can be scared to stand out. See, we think we want to be unique, but we're actually terrified of the judgment. Standing out ain't all positivity and good vibes. Being an innovator or leading people somewhere they never been before, that ain't for the faint of heart. We tend to admire the people who do it, but sometimes we forget about the pressure that comes with it. But it pays off. Those pioneers set the tone for what's possible going forward. When Rodney Jerkins' Darkchild was producing some of those early Brandy and Monica hits back in the 90s, there were people that weren't necessarily fans when he switched up to that Say My Name with Destiny's Child, especially compared to a lot of the R&B that was out at the time. But of course, now we know him as one of the most prolific to ever do it. I'm talking about from Mary J. Blige all the way up to some of SZA's latest. Those risks he took had a huge impact on me. Timbaland and Missy Elliott were taking risks when they came out. The way they blended styles is really what defined their sound, and eventually the critics realized they were onto something. It was something unpredictable. I still think that Timbaland was probably the biggest influence for me. I wanted to stand out like he did. Even my guys the Neptunes, everything they tried wasn't a smash, even though it seems like it was during the early 2000s. There have even been articles that talk about their quote unquote worst moments, but the only reason anybody would even write about their worst is because their best was so good. Otherwise, we wouldn't talk about them at all. Impact, man. And with all of these producers, we know them for having a signature style, their own sound. Why? Because they weren't afraid to stand out. Or maybe they were, but they did it anyway. And that's where we gotta be. Oh, and let me just mention this. You don't need to buy anything to stand out. This isn't about how to buy some off-the-wall, super exclusive VST that nobody has. This is about seeing what's already in front of you with new eyes, with a fresh perspective. A lot of times people assume that to get a different result requires new tools. Sometimes it just requires a new perspective. And I'm a firm believer that we mostly know exactly what to do. We just need reminders and to stop being scared. Now, this first free way to start finding your sound and stand out from the crowd is actually the most fun way to me. I was fortunate. Growing up, my pops listened to just about everything from jazz to soul to gospel to rock to funk and more. Then I started classical piano lessons around age 6. Then I started listening to hip hop and R&B and so on and so on. And in the last few years, I've embraced more electronic music and it's impacted my live shows. So number 1, the first free way to stand out from other producers is to listen to a diverse set of music. Seems obvious, but sometimes we don't realize how much we isolate ourselves inside our own boxes. It's time to step out the comfort zone. What music are you listening to? As producers, we gotta listen to more than 1 or 2 genres. We gotta embrace something uncomfortable, especially if we didn't get exposed to a lot of different music growing up. If we produce trap, you gotta listen to more than trap and more than just hip hop and R&B. Throw something in the mix that we're completely clueless about. Maybe we heard a song in a movie that sounded cool, even though we thought it was way outside our usual style. Look that song up. Check out that artist catalog. Add some psychedelic rock into the playlist. Check out some jazz standards, some classical orchestral pieces. Add some music from another culture, some reggaeton, Brazilian funk, some Bollywood music, some K-pop, Afrobeats, whatever. There is no box. Go down that rabbit hole. This is a rabbit hole worth exploring. And if we want a sustainable career, this is a practice that won't ever end. This music will start to influence some of our creative decisions. It'll be subtle at first, but we'll start to notice how our melodies, rhythms, or instrument selections start to broaden out and diversify. Go with it. Trust your gut. The second way to stand out for free will seem obvious as well, but so many of the producers I coach don't take the time to think about it. Number 2, the second way to find your sound is to stop using these stock sounds without tweaking them. It's okay to use a stock sound, that's not the issue. The issue is using sounds that everyone else has without adding your own flair to it, or at least use it differently. We load up the sound, lay down a melody, and never make it our own. If we're finding that our music doesn't stand out from other producers, we gotta start turning those knobs. Play with that envelope, the attack, delay, sustain, release. Add a little too much reverb and see what happens. Layer a couple of other sounds together. Just make it interesting. Listen, most producers end up with hundreds of drum packs. We all use similar plugins, that's fine, but tweak those settings or add some effects, personalize it. Now, before we get to the third way to find your sound, I need you to understand what's at stake here. If you think that you want to sound like everyone else because it feels safer and it's a way to avoid criticism, you're actually wrong, at least in the long run. Now, you and I may have different goals. You may be looking at music as a quick flip or some kind of get money fast scheme, but I doubt it. If you're watching this, you probably actually care about the music you make. So if that's the case, understand these long-term effects of blending in and sounding like everybody else. We're risking being viewed as the cheap version of somebody else, always being hassled for a lower price, not being recognized for our own creativity, only being called to recreate another producer's sound, and many more annoying things. That's not the producer life you want. Don't get stuck there. Start standing out. Now, if you're still just feeling stuck in general, that's okay. There are probably other self-limiting beliefs that are blocking your journey. I dealt with them. It's good to face those head on, and I have something that can help. You can use my free Get Me Unstuck starter guide to get a jump start on that process. In this free guide, I expose those hidden truths underneath those innocent excuses that are blocking your progress, the exact ways to start counteracting these excuses today, and how to be honest with yourself and others about where you are so you can start to move forward. You don't have to stay in a rut forever. There is a way out. Download the free Get Me Unstuck starter guide at KTGotBeats.com/unstuck. Don't run from these difficult conversations with yourself. Download the guide now. Now, the third free way to find your sound and stand out has a lot to do with what I mentioned at the beginning of this video. It has a lot to do with fear. It's where fear usually comes in the most. I remember 8th grade, when I finally had the chance to burn some of my beats onto a blank CD and bring them into school. I had been making beats for a couple of years, but unless you came to my house, you ain't hear them. And most people had not heard my stuff before. So when I brought them in, the first person I let hear my stuff was my good friend Harold. We called him Dana at the time. His mama drove a Ford Expedition with a lot of bass, and we used to listen to music in there on the regular. But this time I brought my CD. Man, I played that first beat and the bass went crazy. Of course it did. I had zero understanding of mixing, so that's pretty much all you could hear. But I remember before that beat dropped, he was feeling the melody I made with that synth sound, nodding his head. I took note of that, and that's when I realized the third free way to find my sound: feedback. This is a crucial step. It's not necessarily about needing the validation of others as much as it's about learning what others appreciate about your taste, learning what others find unique or interesting about what you do. Of course, we knew this before they heard it, but that recognition confirms what we already knew. And this isn't a one-time step. It happens over time. After you've played dozens of beats for your friends, classmates, family, or whoever, they start to notice a trend, and you do too. There's something special about listening to your music when others are around. It's like you pay much closer attention to the details. You notice, wow, I always use that same snare. I wonder if they notice. Or the golden moment is when a friend says, I knew it was a KT beat when I heard that piano come in. That's when you start to understand you have a sound. It becomes recognizable. This takes time. It takes experimentation. It takes courage, honestly. But it's when you'll start to realize, I'm finding my sound. And by all means, understand, like most things I talk about, it's an infinite game. You'll continue to grow and expand your entire journey. And you know, I'm all about making sure producers have a fulfilling, impactful, and sustainable life around music. That was something I had to learn. And this is a primary part of living that life. Now, in order to be able to connect with those friends, those family members, and work with people, you need to understand the 3 skills that AI can't replace yet, because that's going to take a real human connection. So watch this next video to find out how.